Okay, let's start then. Well, welcome to this very early morning sessions with some jet lag, some hangovers, and mix of everything. So this presentation will be in two parts. First part will be talking about, well, the title, Lightning Network Observability, and how to think about business approach to Lightning and what's important for you as a businesses and what to do with it. The second part will be a short announcement of one of our new products that we are releasing today. So briefly, who am I? I'm a CEO and co-founder of Bolt Observer. I've been running Lightning nodes since 2019, early 2019, both professionally and personally. Lost some Bitcoin along the way, so some of the experience was hard-won through blood and sweat. He also used to work for a European exchange running infrastructure and security, which is where I also got some experience on the enterprise side of things and custody and things like that, which is one of the drivers why I also started this company. But let's go to what you're actually here. So for anyone working in IT, you've heard of observability before. It's basically pretty familiar word in this space, but it originally comes from control theory, even though it was adopted by IT and made famous there. It's very popular in large-scale or distributed systems because they're notoriously hard to manage and monitor. So in systems like that, we use different types of data that we can collect from logs, metrics, traces, etc. That basically gives us visibility into the systems, helps us troubleshoot, uncover bugs, find performance issues, performance bottlenecks. So while this is primarily used in enterprise systems, it can be also applied to Lightning nodes and also more broadly to entire network itself. So, for example, you saw on the first slide or previous slide that control theory basically is about measurable outputs. And what are some outputs that we can measure in Lightning Network? Obvious one is payments. So did the payment succeed or fail? That's essential one. But how long did it take? How many passes it had to try before finding the correct route? Which is also one of the problems we might be facing. How many hops that path actually took? And then we have the liquidity side of everything. Like, do I have enough of it? Do I have inbound capacity? Am I able to accept payments, or can I send them? Or is my liquidity actually being deployed productively? Like, third part of it, obviously this is not an exhaustive list, it's just more to give you an idea of how to think about things, is routing. Like, am I routing anything if I'm a routing node, if that's my primary idea? Or did it recently stop? Why did it stop? Like, did anything change around me, or did my peers lose some capacity, things like that? Those are all the outputs or data points that we want to follow and measure, so we figure out what's happening in the space around us. So why observability? As I already hinted, because we want to know things about our node and the network around us. So the quote, what gets measured gets managed, has been historically abused and misused a lot of times, but it's still true that it actually helps to measure things and see what's happening around you. So I've briefly mentioned my past, but I've spent like 15 years in systems engineering and operations, and for different companies in different sizes, different sectors. But one thing that always makes the biggest difference there is how good is their visibility into their systems. Like, do they have monitoring? Do they have understanding what's happening in their entire infrastructure? And that's what differentiates most of the companies from good to great and makes them actually run better. Of course, observability doesn't solve your bad product problem, but that's a talk for another day. So the first thing is visibility. As it says, complex systems are hard to understand, and I think we can all agree that Lightning Network is not the least complex system out there. So to be able to observe anything, first we need to collect the data, gather all the metrics that we can, and then preferably use some of that. But also, data hoarding is fun by itself for some of us. The second one, if you're a business, is continuity. So as we know, sadly, occasionally, if you have to manage nodes, Lightning Network has no business hours. So you get waken up at 5 a.m. to deal with some shit. Might have happened this week to me, so I can relate to that. So the idea of continuity is that as a business, you want to make sure that your processes, your monitoring is set up in a way that whatever happens, you're at least able to detect it and make sure that your business will continue operating. So if you lose lots of liquidity, you want to know that immediately so you can react to it, or even better, long-term trends, you can follow what's happening when your node, and maybe you're able to detect some of that and prevent it in the future, which is the last point. So observability and visibility is useful, but like the holy grail of all of that is prevention. So if you have the data, if you can plot it, monitor, figure out what's happening, you find some trends, you maybe find bottlenecks that you didn't know you had, and with it, maybe prevent or mitigate some of the issues that you have in your business, infrastructure, or whatever, and save yourself a future headache or two to address it before they become serious problems. So what defines a good payment network? Probably in this room there's as many opinions on that than people, but the underlying one, I think we all agree, is the ability to transfer value, but that only defines a payment network, not a good one. So for payment network to be good, users expect quite a few things, but as users, we don't generally think about them until they're lacking. So if your payments work, you don't care about predictability of payments because, well, they just work, or the reliability of the system. We only care about those things when things go wrong. So before we dig deeper into those, let's check something that we call Lightning Pyramid of Needs. Some of you are probably familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but I chose pyramid for a reason, because as Bitcoiners, you're probably more familiar with pyramid schemes than hierarchies, at least recently. So as you can see, at the bottom, we have reachability. So if your node is not synced, you can't communicate on the network, then, well, it's not a Lightning node, it's just a server. On top of that, we have reliability. So as we mentioned several times before, this is basically your ability to communicate and interact with the network. So your server is synced with the network, you can accept or send payments. Then, as I already hinted on a previous slide, we have predictability. What predictability is every time you send or receive a payment, it has a predictable way of, predictable time, experience, things like that. So those three, I think, are pretty common for every system. Then, of course, as Lightning Network is a payment network, we also have financial viability in terms of our node operations, at least covering the operational costs and not burning a hole in our pocket. And of course, the top one is the holy grail in this space, the profitability of your node. But we'll be focusing on bottom three and maybe tackle the last two next year. So even though the pyramid was named Pyramid of Needs of a Node, the bottom three are also something that define a good network. Besides privacy, of course, but that's not a talk about privacy, so we will skip that part. So reachability, even if you have greatly balanced channels, a lot of liquidity, if your node keeps going down, if your internet connection is dying, you don't really have a node, it's just useless. So you need to take care that your disk space doesn't run out, your they have redundant internet connections, all of that. Definition of reliability is an ability of the system to perform a function without failure. Basically, what this means in this context is you can accept payments, you route payments, you send payments, all of that. So if we think about it, in reliability of payments, standard of it was set by cash. So if I give you 10 euros or $10, that works every time, everywhere. So any system or a network that was invented later is just trying to come close to that in terms of reliability. And I think we can all agree that while Lightning is a pretty good piece of technology, there's definitely room for improvements in terms of reliability and things like that, because, well, we wouldn't be here if everything worked. And the last one, well, besides privacy, is predictability. I already mentioned about expected outcomes, but have you ever tried to pay an invoice from your own node connecting through Tor across the world on a shitty wireless? That's not a predictable outcome, or at least the most predictable outcome of that is that you will suffer and have a long stare down with your barista while waiting on the coffee and that payment to go through. So predictability is basically translates to user experiences in the system. So different things matter to different nodes or different businesses in this case. Depending on what you do as a business or what your primary objective is, you care about different aspects of the network. So for example, if you're a merchant, your primary worry is being able to accept payments. You need inbound liquidity, and that's mostly it. Well, and your store working, but obviously. So if you're a routing node, you care about efficient capital deployment because, well, you want to be earning some good yield on it. As an LSP, your goal is to provide connectivity to users, but also you want to have good connectivity, so you need to, it's beneficial to know what your users are actually doing with it. And as we see, with different constraints, and of course, yeah, we also have personal nodes, but those are, for the purposes of this talk, the easiest to manage or the least interesting in complexity side. So let's see what are some things that different types of nodes that we see here care about in this sector. So positioning in the graph. For example, you're a local merchant in El Zonte. Majority of your economic activity is happening close to you. So you pay your suppliers in Bitcoin, potentially. Your clients are paying you locally. So do you really want to route your payments through Japan and New Zealand and all around the world before they happen? You kind of care where in the graph are you in relation to your clients, your suppliers, and all of that. There also might be other constraints besides just geological one or basically physical one is distance. You might not want to accept payments from Iran or things like that. So as an LSP, you kind of want to have good connectivity to everything, but it also depends on the use cases of your users and what they are doing with it. And of course, if you run a business, you want to be efficient with your capital. As a routing node, no matter how you actually generate yield, either from routing fees, selling liquidity, etc., if you have 100 BTC deployed and only 5 of them are actually earning something, that's a pretty bad setup. So you care about how and where to connect, how to basically ensure that all the Bitcoin deployed in your node is an actual productive asset instead of just you basically moving it from cold to hot storage and not getting anything in return of that. So next thing is your neighborhood. I've been talking about neighborhoods in Lightning for quite a while, but for anybody that has looked into what their nodes are doing or has a Lightning business, does any of you have a statistic or what's the average hop length of your payments? No? Okay. But generally, between 3 and 4 hops is probably most of the payments that happen in the network. So your neighborhood is something that basically surrounds you within 2 hops. So your peers and peers of peers. Because you might have, now, let's say you're a merchant, you have 10 BTC of liquidity, but you only have 2 or 3 channels because that's all you need to accept payments. But what happens if your channel peers lose a lot of liquidity on their side? You don't actually have 10 BTC of liquidity. You're bounded by liquidity of your neighbors and closest peers. So you have to think further out than just your own node, because that's actually where most of the activity happens, and that's your constraint in the long term. Or if you're a routing node, maybe you stopped routing that much. Did your peers change fees significantly? That impacts your pathfinding. Or did many new channels open in a different part of network? This is all something that you actually need to think about if you want to be a profitable business or even just operate as a business. And of course, actually knowing where your payments are going in terms of destination, even though that might not be very popular on the privacy side, can significantly improve your user experience. So maybe you analyze your payments and see that the third hop is the same for 60% of the payments. Well, just open a channel to that third hop, remove 2 of the hops before, you will save on fees, you will significantly improve speed, and your users will be much happier on both sides. And of course, it might be an unpopular opinion, but Tor is horrible. And if you run any statistics and see what's happening, like routing through 1 or 2 Tor peers can add like 20 seconds to your payments. So, I mean, I think the last 6 months or more have shown to everyone in the space that we have some problems with Tor, and definitely as a merchant, you want to pay attention that, or any business in the space, you want to pay attention that your peers are not Tor only or primary, just Tor, because you will definitely have a lot of problems. And mostly on the latency side, but that can also then lead to various force closures and things like that. So a quick recap of what we covered if you slept through most of this. This is still an ungodly early hour. Observability is pretty fundamental to what you're doing as a business. And after Bitcoin, of course, data is the most valuable thing in Lightning Network. And we're starting to see more and more of that. So there's already a lot of things you can do with the data that's basically given to you by the network. It's more about packaging it and actually thinking about it more deeply. And all of the problems mentioned currently or in this presentation will only grow as the network grows. And when we go, 10x, pathfinding becomes a significantly more complicated problem. And all of the nodes being down, badly deployed liquidity, all of that starts becoming even more complicated than it already is. So let's move to the marketing side of this presentation. There's a secret agenda why I've been talking about observability. So as I already mentioned, I founded a company called Observer. We're a Lightning startup building monitoring and management tools, as you might have guessed through the presentation. We're trying to remove some of the complexity from running Lightning infrastructure from businesses to basically help them focus on building cool shit instead of just dealing with the node management all the time. So we have 2 products, and the third one that we will be talking about a bit later. Did any of you use any of our tools before? Okay, so some of you. So it's very popular in this space to create an explorer. We all know that. But we created ours to firstly solve an internal problem for our second product that is mentioned on the slide. So we wanted to have a very data-driven approach to how we can explore the network. So see how far some nodes are from us, connect to as much distance, have as much distance between our infrastructure so we can cover the nodes, the network from different angles. And we also like to play with data and see what happens or have some cool stats. So the second one is reachability. You've heard that word several times today already, so you might guess that it's basically monitoring your uptime. So we have 3 checks. Basically, we can ping you over the TCP or whatever, so we just try if your internet is still working. We also do a peering connection with you to see if your node is working, but in the end, we can also perform like an HTLC check because that really determines if you're able to accept payments. And of course, if anything of those doesn't work, we have plenty of integrations to send you a notification. You can get an email or all the possible chats, whatever. We have PagerDuty, Obsgenie, things like that. But, OK, of course, something is missing on the slides. Just a disclaimer, I'm seeing the slides for the second time, so not much difference between you and me. So this is a product that we're launching today. It's, as you might have noticed, we're terribly good at naming. We're slightly better at building, so try our tools before you judge us with our creative naming of things. So what LiquidOps does is, well, that's the general idea. As I already mentioned, we're building tools to help you as node operators. And one of them is liquidity management is a pretty bad problem in the space. So with LiquidOps, we're trying to solve all of your problems in that space. Of course, not every problem is going to be solved in today's release. But this is like the general idea of what we're building on a long time horizon. So providing you like a high-level overview of what's your situation around liquidity and everything, trying to enable more operational view of alerting, monitoring, having some nice charts, exports, things like that. But also with that, improving your efficiency of capital deployment, and later moving to full liquidity automation. So what it does as of today is basically it adds monitoring and alerting capability to your node. So you can, for example, we will do a short demo if time permits, but basically you have inbound, outbound liquidity alerts. You can monitor if your channel peers are still up, or like, for example, I know you have a couple of channels. It's not only important that you have enough balance, it's mostly important that that channel is actually active. Maybe your node that you're peering with went down, or something happened to the channel. Then very soon, hopefully after the conference, we are releasing a cumulative alert. So maybe you don't care about a specific channel, you just need to have an ability to push out, I don't know, 10 million sets. So you can just set an alert on that, basically a node level. I just care about ability to have this much sets on my side. Where they're distributed over channels doesn't really matter. And as we have experienced some volatility this year, we're also adding the ability to basically have alerts in fiat. So you need to be able to push out, I don't know, $10,000. If Bitcoin price varies 20% a day, you don't want to be changing your alerts based on that. You just want to say, OK, no matter the volatility, just alert me when all of the sets on my side fall below this amount. So, OK, I already mentioned a bit what's coming. But yeah, as I said, we want to do full automated liquidity management. But also the way we're building things, we want to basically become an operational platform for you, so you can just use parts of our platform if you don't need anything, parts of our solutions, and integrate with existing things that you do, your existing workflows. And of course, the fun part of every business, accounting and all of that. But I say that the need for accounting in this space is one of the best possible indicators that we're actually growing up from being just reckless and playing with it. Now it's starting to matter what we do with our nodes and our businesses. So even though it's not sexy, accounting is still important, and visibility for a business and what's happening with their financials is becoming more and more important. So that's definitely something we're doing. And part of liquidity is also liquidity marketplaces, which we are integrating soonish, because why rebalance if you can just buy more liquidity and if it's potentially cheaper? So we have 2 minutes left. Maybe I can show some of the things. But does anybody have any questions? Feel free to ask while I change this.
Just one question.
Sure.
Given today the mempool is like over 100 blocks, how will the algorithm try to balance the liquidity automatically? How would you look like? I saw that that is for a future release.
Yeah.
But how does that look like?
Well, it's a very solid question, and that's one of the things that we need to take into consideration, because we've all gotten used to empty mempools and atomic swaps being a very reliable way to rebalance, but that's one of the reasons why very smart deployment of channels will be that much more important in the future, because if we're constantly having full mempool, you can't rely on opening a new channel or rebalancing through swaps. You actually want to know that you deployed that BTC in a way that will serve you all of the time. So I don't have a great answer to it, because it's a pretty hard problem to solve, but that makes it that much more important that we are actually aware of that. So
That's what I'm asking.
yeah, maybe you want to monitor the size of mempool and make decisions based on that. So instead of waiting for 5% of inbound on your side and trying to do something about it, then you do something at 20% if the second parameter is mempool is full, because that limits your ability on what you can do with it in a short period of time. So, OK, I have a minute left, so just a brief overview how our Liquid Ops platform looks. So you have the basic channel view with balances, all of that, and some plots. But the more interesting part of it is all the alerts you can set. So channel opens, channel close, connectivity, and then, for example, balances, inbound, outbound. And you can set various different levels of alerts. So, for example, notify me when I have 25% of balance left, but at 5%, call a webhook on our end, and we will just trigger a swap automatically, because then it becomes a critical for a business, and you just need to execute something no matter the cost, because you obviously optimize for business continuity, not cost at that time. And that's basically it. We're running out of time, so if anybody has any questions, of course, talk to us later. A couple of us have these shirts on, so we're happy to chat about this all day. You can follow us on Twitter for more updates, and Liquid Ops is enabled for everyone that's using our platform, so check it out. We're hoping for a feedback. While it's in beta, we're going to give it out for free for anybody, and that's at least going to last till end of the year. But at some point, as everyone in this space, we're hoping to be profitable. So see you soon, and thank you for your time.